All right, so for my pathophysiology discussion one, I have decided to look at the scenario concerning Betty's situation. So, Betty is 60 years old and retired. She's been diagnosed with osteoporosis. She's fairly healthy and she really likes to be active. So, the way that I would explain Betty's diagnosis of osteoporosis to her is that it's a disease that weakens your bones. This was based on class content. So they make your bones so that they're less dense. They may start to lose their form as well as their strength. Um, we tend to see this more in perimenopausal and menopausal women, and that may have to do with the levels of estrogen beginning to drop post-menopause or during menopause, and that can lead to a decrease in bone density. So often with osteoporosis, it can be almost undetectable until you experience a spontaneous fracture, and it's even sometimes referred to as the silent disease because many don't even realize that they have it until this occurs. So I would just assure Betty that there are things that we can put in place. It's not something that we can cure or get rid of altogether. But just let her know that unless it was something that she was, getting frequent bone density scans for, it's incredibly hard to detect. So make sure that she's not feeling any guilt or shame or anything for not coming to the doctor sooner, unless the reason for her visit was that she did get a bone scan, and that's how she has determined that she does indeed have osteoporosis. Also, something that I really like to do is to give people analogies or just make it so that it's easier for them to understand things that are going on inside their body. So to give Betty a better understanding of what's going on with her bones, I personally love using the honeycomb analogy. So think of your bone like a honeycomb. We know what that looks like. It's that hexagonal shape filled with honey. With osteoporosis, so think of the holes of the honeycomb, they become larger and larger. So what ends up happening is that you have more open areas within your bone, as opposed to like that densely packed honeycomb. So, I mean, with that, it makes it so that your bones they're easier to break. So, a unique clinical presentation of osteoporosis that was learned using class content is that in the early stages, it is almost undetectable. So, often the first signs that may be noticed would be trouble maintaining an erect posture, having an impaired gait, which essentially means having like a lack of balance or um, yeah, like a lack of balance walking or, just impairment of moving the legs at an equal or balanced rate. Deformities of the spine, which could be anything from scoliosis, which is when your spine kind of like conforms into like an S shape, so like a lateral curve. Kyphosis, which is the forward rounding of the spine near the neck, and then there's lordosis as well, which is a curvature of the spine above the buttocks. And then some other just general symptoms could include some symptoms could be, pain wherever the osteoporosis is more highly present. Typically, if you have osteoporosis, it would be present kind of in like all of your bones would start to lack that density. But you may notice pain more, especially when you're utilizing or straining certain parts of your body. Another unique clinical manifestation of osteoporosis has to do with the altering of the spine that can occur, since we know that this is something that commonly happens. When your spine does start to alter in its shape or appearance, it can actually cause you to lose some height. So you might not have the same ability to stand up straight as what you previously did. And this is where people could get the idea that you shrink as you age because people who do have osteoporosis, they genuinely do lose height. And I mean, by no means do all older adults have osteoporosis, but this could be just one reason why people have that general idea of, as you get older, you shrink because this is one thing that may be common in the older population that does cause people to lose height. A clinical manifestation that may have led Betty into seeing the doctor and inevitably getting diagnosed with osteoporosis could be that because she lives an active lifestyle, um, quite possibly she started experiencing pain or difficulty doing activities that she had previously done with ease. Another unique manifestation of osteoporosis, which I priorly mentioned, is since sometimes it can be nearly undetectable, the first sign that she even had osteoporosis, um, or it could have indicated her that she has it, is if she spontaneously broke a bone. And that truly is the case for many people that are diagnosed with it. The etiology of osteoporosis can vary from person to person. As learned from class content, sometimes it can be idiopathic, so that means it has no known cause. We don't really know why you might have it or why certain people might have it or Betty. And we don't know, based on the discussion scenario, what her reason for it, for having osteoporosis may be. But another thing, it could be hereditary. So if, many people in your family have osteoporosis, that may make you more prone to getting it, as well. It could be because of lifestyle choices, such as living a sedentary lifestyle, or a long-term span of, eating inadequate amounts of calcium, or as priorly mentioned, which could be the case as Betty, as she would meet the demographic for this, but that decline in estrogen, perimenopausal or postmenopause, she would be within the demographic for that being a possibility as well. And then, according to the website Osteoporosis Canada, in 2021, osteoporosis mainly differs from other bone diseases because although it has to do with the deterioration of bone and bone density, the bone tissue becomes dry and brittle, with osteoporosis, as opposed to there are other diseases that may impact the density and the strength of bone. But with those bone diseases, it could have to do with them, making the bone more soft and malleable, for example. Whereas with osteoporosis, it's when that bone tissue becomes, like I said, it loses its density and it becomes dry and brittle, which makes it very prone for breaks that way as well. Interventions are going to differ depending on the etiology for Betty's osteoporosis. And the point of interventions in this situation, like I priorly mentioned, there is no cure for osteoporosis, but interventions can either help to reduce the speed at which the bone deteriorates, or it could also help to rebuild the bone itself at a faster rate, so it evens out the deterioration. As well, working to strengthen the muscles around the bone. So at least that way, if your bones aren't offering a ton of support, the muscles around the bones can offer you that support that way. So the first thing that I would mention to Betty, since she's already active, I would encourage her to remain that way. The National Institute on Aging in 2017 suggested that physical activity helps to build and strengthen the muscles as well as the bones. However, I would just advise Betty to avoid higher risk activities that might increase her risk of breaking a bone or experiencing pain. So, activities that involve a lot of twisting of the spine or bending at the waist, could increase pain for her. And also, with all that twisting and bending, she could be more prone perhaps to maybe lose her balance. And if she were to fall, break a bone that way. So activities that may, have an increased likelihood of taking a fall, or like I said, that twisting, bending of the spine. I would just encourage her to do those, to avoid those activities if possible, or use extreme caution when doing so. Along with that, I would encourage her to use ambulatory aids if needed and let her know where she can access these so she can continue to do her favorite activity safely. Another intervention that I would suggest to Betty is to evaluate her diet just to be sure that she's getting enough calcium. As well, the National Institute on Aging in 2017 recommends ensuring adequate vitamin D intake as well so that all the calcium is getting absorbed properly. As we already know from prior knowledge, from our anatomy and physiology course, as well as some research I've done independently, from the National Institute of Health in 2021, calcium is an essential mineral for bone health. So if Betty is concerned, that she's not getting enough calcium in her diet, I would recommend that she try to up her intake of foods such as milks, yogurt, cheese. Certain veggies like kale or even broccoli contain some calcium as well. But if she feels like she still isn't getting enough of those, enough calcium through those food choices, or those choices aren't an option, so um, perhaps milk, yogurt, cheeses, that type of thing, for some can be hard to digest, or they can have lactose sensitivities. So if those food items aren't an option for her, there are supplements for calcium and multivitamins as well that can be taken. However, it is definitely more optional if you're able to get minerals through your diet. Those are still an option, as opposed to going a better option than having a lack in calcium. And then the same thing with vitamin D. So supplements are available, if needed, but also a great source of vitamin D is just soaking up the sun. So since Betty loves to be active, I would encourage and recommend that when possible, she do her activities outside. So whether that means, if physical activity for her means yoga, means going for walks, hikes, runs, just doing some basic exercises in home. Maybe bring a yoga mat out to her front yard, do these things in the sun, of course, weather permitting. We all know, I mean, if she's lives in New Brunswick this time of year, it's not optimal to do exercises outside. But just whenever possible, take the opportunity to soak up some sun. Um, since humans are able to synthesize vitamin D naturally that way, and that way she can be sure she's getting vitamin D as needed. Like I said, supplements are an option, but vitamin D, as we learned from our anatomy and physiology class, um, it's a vitamin that if we get too much of it can become toxic and harmful to our body. So if she was, concerned about taking supplements and that she was going to be getting too much, like I said, I would just recommend anything she can do outside, get some sunshine on her skin. I would definitely recommend that for her as well. So, with listing off those last interventions, that concludes my discussion discussing Betty and her osteoporosis diagnosis.